Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about this. Warmachine and Hordes by MKIV Press. Okay, let's go. With the announcement of Mark 4, I thought I'd do a video talking about Warmachine and Hordes. The game first came out 20 years ago, so it's quite an old game now actually. It survived quite some time. When it first came out, the tabletop landscape was quite different. This was one of the first games that was focused, or built up, should we say rather, around competitive play. Games Workshop was still the dominating force at the time. Their game, well, Warhammer 40,000 and War Fantasy Battles were more sort of beer pretzel sort of focused. They weren't as competitive. You had tournaments by all means, but the game engine, if you will, wasn't designed around that. Whereas Warmachine, everything was powerful because everything was broken. In the game, if I can get to the there we are, Warjacks. So the Warjacks, they could do power attacks. They had, especially if they had open fists, they could do throws, arm locks, weapon locks, slam attacks, and with your head you could do a headbutt. So this gave you a lot of power to play on the battlefield. Also, the Warcasters, they all had a focus point number, which is how much magic points they generated. And with that, they had to, it was like a game within a game, because it was resource management. You had to use your focus points to allocate to your Warjacks for them to do running, charging, power attacks, or to do additional attacks, or to even boost the attack roll or the damage roll. And you also use the focus points to cast your spells. Each spell had a cost. So another thing that makes it stand out was that when you cast a spell, there was no chance of you dying from the spell. It was pretty much done. And the opponent couldn't dispel that spell. It was, you've cast that spell. It was your turn. Boom, spell's done. Whether you hit the target or not, if it was a magic missile, that's a different story. So with things like that, it really made the game stand out at the time, because 20 years ago, there was nothing really like this on the landscape. Another thing that really helped it stand out was actually quite a few things, was that the setting was quite unique. It wasn't a dark age or a high fantasy. It was its own thing. It was like a steampunk industrial revolution fantasy. You had the fantasy, you have mainly humans in the core book, but there were in the mercenaries, I think there was an Ogrin. I think he was a dwarf. Well, they call him Rulik. I think he's a dwarf. The Trollkin and the elf, which they called him. I think she was a Nis. Or anyway, so there were obviously the generic fantasy races there, but the main focus of this game was primarily on the human kingdoms and how they war with each other. Again, another thing is the entry point was very low. You could buy what's called a battle box. So in the Decadal battle box, for example, you got a Destroyer Warjack, Heavy Warjack, and a Juggernaut Heavy Warjack, and you got Commander Sorcerer. If I can find her, where is she? Good old Butcher. He's one of my favourites back in the day. There we are. Commander Sorcerer. She was a fantastic Warcaster, and those three models were enough to get going with the game. Now, some of the other battle groups had more models. The Decadal was the one that had the fewest number of models. I think it was like 4 for Menoth, 4 for Signar, and I think it was 5 for Crix. You can see Menoth here somewhere. Here we are, Protector of Menoth, the religious nut jobs, who are a bit partial to fire, a bit too partial to fire, should we say rather. So yeah, with that was the entry point. You could buy one box and you could play the game. And in that box, you had all the rules for the models you had. You had also little data cards, which contained all the information here. Because as you can see on their Warjacks, they have a damage grid. So they take damage as the game goes along, and they lose systems. So you had to mark down damage. So you needed like sleeve for your cards to go in. And they had all the information there. You didn't need the rule book. It was just for point of reference and for the background. So yeah, you got that in the game, in the box rather, sorry. The other thing you didn't get was a battle mat and dice and the templates on tape measure. Those things came in, I think it was Mark 3 box sets, battle groups. They had dice, focus counters, and tape measure and a little mat to play as well with, like 2D terrain on the battle mat. So pretty much everything you needed was there. If you didn't buy a battle box, you could get the rules online, I do believe, as well. They were free, which for the time 20 years ago was unheard of. I don't think any game company, well, fantasy or sci-fi game company were doing online rules for free at the time. So that was the Warmachine, that was chugging along. Then they introduced Hordes. Now Hordes was a same system, same core mechanics, but it was more bestial. This was about the war beasts and warlocks. And where Warmachine was a resource management with your focus, as mentioned earlier, this was more a risk management. Because in this, your war beasts, if I can find, this is the Legion of Everblight. This book's in better condition for some reason. Okay, I think maybe I got more play out of Warmachine back in, like I say, it's 20 years old, so it's hard to remember. Where's the war beasts? Ah, here we are. So look at this here, the Carnivine. They had a Fury and a Threshold count. Your Fury, because as you war beasts go along, they generate, you force them to do more of the power attacks and more of the charging. They generate Fury points, which you then leech off with your Warlock up to their Fury limits, which in this case for Val is 8. And any war beasts with Fury on them risk going frenzied and attacking the nearest thing. So that's the main thing that separated it. It was about war beasts and warlocks. Oh, another thing as well to mention is how every war beast had an animus. Like up here we are, this is subdue. This was a spell that the actual beast itself had, and any warlock who was controlling that war beast had that spell. So if you took, say, Tyrant Lord Herxis and you took a Cyclops Savage, you would get prescience on both the Cyclops Savage and also from Lord Herxis. He'd have it himself. So that was enough that helps the game stand out. And the two games were completely compatible. You could have a Circle of Ouroboros against a Menoth. You could do any of so the game then had 8 factions essentially. Good old Trollkin. And again, everything was going along really well. The game was fantastic. Everyone enjoyed it, played it. And then Priority Press, sadly, they started doing some really, I think, questionable decisions. The factions as they are here are pretty much self-contained, I thought, with the units and solos. They didn't need any more. War Beasts and Warlocks, or Warjacks and Warcasters, by all means add more to them, but they just couldn't restrain adding new units, and that led to the problem where a lot of the units were standing on the toes of other units, to the point where in Signar, the prime example of this is they had a unit of long gunners, which obviously as the name suggests, they're the long gunners, and they had a unit of trenchers, which again as the name suggests were trenchers. 2 separate units. As time went on, with more and more units being added, because they just couldn't stop releasing units, they added a unit that was both. So they had a unit of trencher long gunners, which it stood on both their feet. Why take trenchers when you can take long gunner trenchers, and vice versa? Why take long gunners when you can take trencher long gunners? It just kind of made other units obsolete. There was that aspect of it, and they also couldn't stop, because they couldn't stop releasing units. It diluted the factions differences, if you will. Because for example, if I look at this one, like Scorn, for example, if I remember correctly, initially they were one of the few factions with really big, heavily armored, ranged units going on. Like these guys here. I mean, every other faction in Hordes had a large based infantry, and because these guys had the warmongers, I think they're called, yeah, warmongers. As time went on, they then gave them a unit of the war spears, basically they're similar to these, but they throw spears. So that kind of made the distinction between the factions dilute. That's just one example. Over the 20 years, there was a lot of releases for this game, which kind of made the factions just seem cosmetically different, not playstyle different, which was annoying, because one of the great selling points of the game was you could say to someone, buy a battle box and buy a few warcasters and change the warcaster, or even the warlock rather, and that will change your game. That will play completely different, because each warcaster and warlock plays completely different to one another, and they've all got unique spells and abilities and a feat, so they're completely different to one another and will change how you approach the game. So that was another thing that they did that was annoying. They also had what's called press gangers, who are people who are passionate about the game, and they would help run events and tournaments and such, and give away goodies that Priority Press had given them. They got rid of them to Priority Press for some reason. They got rid of the press ganger program, and that left quite a bitter taste in people's mouth. There was also a forum they had where you could go online, you could speak to the game designers, you could speak to the painters, ask them questions. They closed that down, and again, that was having that sort of level of contact was really handy at the time, because this is 20 years ago, so this is long before social media websites like Facebook and WhatsApp and things like that. I don't know, is WhatsApp even social media? But anyway, it's long before things like that, and it helped them stand out from the crowd, that you could actually engage with the game designers. That was fantastic, but they closed it down for some reason. So all these things were happening, and the game, I won't say languishing, but what helped it stand out was being chipped away at. So that brings us on to Mark 4. So Mark 4's been announced. Yeah, interesting, very interesting. Where should I begin with first? I think I'll begin with they're, well, not scrapping as much, but they're not going to produce anything of the old Warmachine anymore. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once those models have got sold, they're not making any more. That's much to the annoyance of a lot of veterans of the game who've got models missing from their collection. Now I may find that if they can't get those models, that's it, they're gone. A decision which was needed, to be fair, given the size of the backlog. I mean, I think there's a program you can go online that Priority Press have, where you can get all the cards, so you can see what units are available, and I think it's pushing over 1,000 units, or 1,000 entries, should we say, rather, that's excessive. That's far too many. So with that, that's a good step. I can see that was needed. However, the way they're doing that, I think, is the wrong way. I think instead of scrapping everything, they should have scaled back down to the units and solos that were in Primal and Prime, for obviously Hordes and Warmachine, and for the other factions like Convergence of Chris, Retribution, and Grimkin and Infernals, scale them back down to just like these are the core units, the core solos. Warlocks and War Beasts and all them things, that's fine. Have multiples of them, because they really help shape the army you have, and they're not. There's only one model you replace in there, not whole units, so that's not too bad. So, a bit of a mixed bag about that one there. The other thing that they've done that's going to be quite annoying to people is they're changing the unit sizes. So if you have, I'll go to it now, bear with me a minute. So, for example, let's look at Praetorian Swordsman, okay, here. So the max unit in size is 10 models, okay? They're going from a leader and 5 models, so it's 6 models. They're going down to 5 is your minimum size unit. No more, you can have 10, so you can have 5. Which, if you've got a unit, if you've got 10 of these, that's fine, because you can have 2 units of 5 then. So you're not going to be affected by that. This is where it comes into issue. Models on larger bases, or medium bases rather, sorry. They start off as a leader and 2 troops, and you can add 2 additional troops. So you can have, well, those not ones actually, you can have 5 models in those units. They're going down to 3 models max, I do believe. So you're going to have some models just on a shelf that you can't really use anymore, because they don't support that size of unit. But it's not all bad. With the Mark IV, there are some rules that I really like they've done. For example, they've given all War Beasts and Warjacks something called a dual attack. So if you have, let me find a War Beast or Warjack, oh sorry, here we are, good old Destroyer. You've got a Warjack here, it's got a melee attack and it's got a ranged attack. Now with dual attack, you can use both of those when engaged in combat, and you can even use your ranged attack against a different target, which is fantastic, because before, up until then, unless you've got dual attack as a special rule, or you're given it by a warcaster, you're locked in combat. Nothing you can do about your powerful range attack there. And in some cases, some of the warjacks have really powerful range attacks. So losing that was a bit of a blow to the warjack. Now you can fire away, which is fantastic. They've also changed how sprays and area effects work, because before, where's the spray token? It's in the back of you actually. So before, this was the spray and this was the blast. Now this is changing. Now it's just going to be a straight line. You measure from your model. If you've got spray and any model touched by that, you roll to see if they hit. Area effect is now just going to be, this is you don't put this down, it's the closest models within this get hit. So it's much more simpler. Those things I like. I think they've also made it so that if you run now, it's just plus 5 inches and not double your movement stat, if I remember correctly. So that's that standardization really helps. They've also changed the rules for terrain, or made terrain more a thing in the game. There was a push for, I don't know why people did this, I never did this personally, and I think it looked horrible, was 2D terrain that you push models along, and no, that was just, oh no, terrain should be 3D. With the new edition Mark 4, which is coming out very soon, it looks like terrain's back. 3D terrain that you can interact with is going to be back. Fantastic. But this all leads to the big problem with Mark 4, and that's how they're doing models now. They're no longer going to have metal models, which is understandable, because metal, when it first came out, everything was metal. Everything in this game was metal. I remember carrying carry cases with my K-Door, and it was, I'm surprised I didn't get a hernia because it was that heavy. They're changing it now to being 3D printed, but it's not 3D printed where you get given the files. It's 3D printed where you buy it from them, and it's a very interesting take, because the market is gearing towards HIPs, high injection plastic, and they're going a completely different direction. It's baffling. It really is a bit of a head scratcher. The quality we've seen come out so far, yeah, it looks nice for the most part. And there's a lot of indication that it's quite brittle. We have seen people who've been dry brushing, and the molds are broken at the hip, at the legs, and weapon are broken where it's thin. It can be fixed quite easily, but that's beyond the point. They shouldn't be in a place where the models can break that easily when just painting. If they're transported and knocked and fall over, that's understandable. But just carrying them, just painting them, I was sorry, no. And they are charging quite a high price for what is I won't say inferior product, but rather if you look at most 3D printed models that people do themselves, they're cheap. That's the benefit of 3D painting. It's very cheap to do at home. They're going to be at retail price, and it's retail price as in what you're paying now, if not more. So that was a bit of a shock as well. Honestly, I love the game. I think it's a fantastic game. It's got a lot of character, and it would be a shame to see this game fall off the radar of the tabletop wargaming world, because there's nothing like this I can think of. It's got a very unique setting. It's got some fantastic core mechanics. It's got some really great, aggressive, full-throttled play. It really rewards tactical thinking about what you're doing. If you make a single mistake in this game, you can lose the game. Yeah, but I think they've made, along the way, too many mistakes. And I think they're making a big mistake with this push to 3D printing. And I think making the mistake of not invalidating, but saying to the community as a whole that all your models are gone, and now we're doing new models, and it's, I won't say complete different art direction, but there's a marked difference between the models we're seeing and what we've come in known to love of the aesthetics of previous factions, especially Signar. They look completely different. They look full-on sci-fi now. So yeah, it's a bit of a remorseful video this, because I really like the system and I've got large armies for it, but I think we could be seeing maybe the departure of Privateer Press as a company. Over the years, they've made, like I say, some questionable decisions, and I think now that they are desperate, and I think that's what this really shows. The fact that they've launched it so quick, the announcements have come out, they've had to push things back already. We've seen people with models that have, well, they're 3D printed, I'm seeing some that the resin hasn't cured properly yet. Yeah, just a few concerns. Yeah, if you're a fan of Privateer Press and you've watched this, I'm sorry that this is a bit of a down at the end. You can probably tell by how I've waxed on lyrically that I really like this game. Personally, I think I might just stick with Mark 3, because Mark 3 for me was a good system. The whole Warjacks powering up, fantastic. I think that really helped the game. It gave Warjacks a bit of an edge. The changing from the power field, how it worked, again, fantastic. The one bad thing about Mark 3 was the themed force list. No, they were a mistake. So yeah, we'll see how it goes for Privateer Press. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong, and they make it into a great success, and they become as big as they were, because they were huge at one point. They looked to be setting up to be a rival for Games Workshop, and they just made so many mistakes along the way that they've now become a form. Well, they've had to go to Kickstarter for a few things, for example. So that's never a good look for a big company. Yeah, anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment below. As always, I'll catch you later.